You walk outside one morning and something is wrong. Not dramatically wrong, quietly wrong. The feeder is full, the water is clean, nothing visible has changed. But the yard that was full of cardinals and chickadees 3 days ago is completely empty, and you have no idea why. By the end of this video, you will know the 5 real reasons birds stop visiting and exactly what to do to bring them back. Because in almost every case, the answer has been sitting right in front of you. You just did not know what you were looking at. Welcome to Bird Minds. Stay until the very end because the 5th reason is the one that hits closest to home and the one most people wish someone had told them sooner. The first reason happens the fastest, and it leaves behind almost no evidence. A predator found your feeder, not passed through, found it. There is a critical difference. A hawk flying over your yard produces a temporary response. Birds scatter, go quiet for 15 minutes, then gradually return. That is the system working correctly. But a hawk that has learned your feeder is a reliable hunting location does something different. It begins returning. Same time, same position. The dense shrub at the corner of your yard that gives it a clear sight line to the feeder without being easily visible from it. Researchers call this sight fidelity, and once a predator establishes it at your feeding station, every bird in the local area updates its threat assessment of your yard. Not just the birds that witness the hawk directly, but every bird connected to the alarm network that runs through your neighborhood continuously. The fix is not removing the feeder, it is relocating it. Move it to a position with better escape cover nearby, closer to dense shrubs, away from the sightline the predator identified. A hawk that cannot hunt from its preferred position will move on within days. But the next reason surprises almost every backyard birder, because it keeps affecting your yard long after the threat itself is gone. The second reason operates more slowly, but it produces a more permanent outcome. A cat began regularly patrolling your yard, and the birds did not just react to the cat they could see. They reacted to the evidence that a predator considers this space its territory. Researchers found that yards with regular cat presence showed significantly reduced bird activity across all hours of the day. Not just when the cat was actively present, birds were routing around the yard entirely based on accumulated behavioral evidence, disturbed ground cover, scent trails, the alarm responses of other birds in the area who had already updated their own threat assessment. A yard that carries the signature of regular cat patrol is a yard birds avoid even on mornings the cat never appears. The solution requires interrupting the patrol pattern physically, motion-activated sprinklers near the feeder perimeter, removing the ground-level cover cats used to approach unseen, making the space uncomfortable enough to patrol that the cat redirects its territory elsewhere. Given enough time without that evidence, birds gradually revise their assessment. But it takes longer than most people expect, because the information that your yard was unsafe spread through the community, and reversing it requires the same slow process of accumulated evidence working in the opposite direction. The third reason is one most people feel uncomfortable about when they hear it, because it means the birds detected something wrong before you did. Your feeding setup became a health hazard. Wet seed sitting in the base of a feeder for more than 2 or 3 days develops mold and bacteria at a rate that accelerates dramatically in warm or humid conditions. Aspergillus, a fungal pathogen that causes fatal respiratory disease in birds, grows readily in improperly maintained feeders. Salmonella spreads through droppings accumulating on feeder surfaces and the platforms below. Both are effectively invisible to the human eye at the concentrations that are already dangerous to birds. Here is the part that matters most. Healthy birds detected the elevated risk and began avoiding the site before any sick birds were visibly identifiable. The birds stopped visiting your feeder before you noticed anything wrong, because they noticed first. Clean your feeder every 2 weeks in dry weather, every 5 to 7 days in warm or humid conditions. 9 parts water to 1 part white vinegar, scrubbed and rinsed completely. Remove any seed that has become wet or clumped. Empty the platform below regularly. These are not optional. They are the difference between a feeding station that supports your bird community and one that quietly damages it. The fourth reason causes the most unnecessary anxiety because it looks like a problem when it is actually the opposite. The natural food landscape became so abundant that your feeder became irrelevant. During peak summer and certain windows in early fall, the food available in the natural environment surrounding your yard simply outcompetes anything a feeder can offer. Insects at peak emergence. native plants producing seeds and berries. The caloric density and nutritional variety in the natural landscape reaches a level that makes supplementary feeding a less efficient use of the bird's foraging time. A chickadee collecting protein-rich caterpillars 30 feet from your yard is making a nutritionally superior choice by ignoring your sunflower seed. This is not a rejection of your yard. It is the birds directing their energy toward the highest return food available, given current conditions. Your feeder will become relevant again when natural food abundance drops, typically in late fall as insects disappear, berries are depleted, and wild seeds are exhausted. But maintaining the feeder through the quiet months matters more than most people realize. The birds that return when natural food gets scarce are not just the birds you knew before. They are this year's juvenile birds, newly independent, learning the food landscape they will depend on through their first winter. A feeder that was clean and full when they first needed it becomes part of their established resource map. A feeder that ran empty during summer does not. And now, the fifth reason, the one I saved for last. Because this one has nothing to do with predators or seed or cleanliness. It has to do with something much harder to see. You became inconsistent, and the birds noticed before you did. No dramatic event, no hawk, no cat, no visible problem. The yard looks fine. The feeder is there. But something changed in the reliability of what your yard represented to the birds that had been coming every morning. Maybe the feeder ran empty for 5 days during a cold week. Maybe the water went stagnant longer than usual. Maybe the predictable morning presence, the person who showed up at the same time, moved quietly, provided the cue that this site was active and maintained, stopped appearing with the same regularity. Here is what the research shows. Visit frequency at supplementary feeding sites is more strongly predicted by consistency of maintenance than by seed quality or feeder design. A modest feeder reliably maintained outperformed an elaborate feeder inconsistently maintained across every measure of bird activity researchers tracked. Birds do not simply respond to resources, they respond to reliable resources. A food source that is sometimes present and sometimes absent registers differently in a bird's foraging calculation than a food source that is consistently there. The cognitive investment required to include an unreliable site in a foraging route is not worth the return. Birds root toward predictability, away from variability. And your yard gradually drops out of the calculation, not because something dramatic drove the birds away, but because the reliability that kept them returning quietly eroded. And this is the part that is hardest to hear. By the time you notice the yard is quiet, the reassessment has already happened. The birds have already updated their foraging routes. The information has already circulated through the local bird community. Getting them back requires rebuilding the reputation for reliability through the same slow accumulation of consistent behavior that built it the first time. There is no shortcut. There is no trick that compresses the timeline. There is only showing up, the same way, long enough for the birds to update their assessment again. So here's what an empty yard actually is. Not bad luck, not mystery. A yard giving you specific readable information about what changed. A predator found the position, relocate the feeder. A cat mapped the patrol route, interrupt it physically. The maintenance slipped, clean everything and start fresh. Natural abundance temporarily made the feeder irrelevant. Maintain it anyway and be there when the season turns. The consistency eroded. Rebuild it morning by morning until the reputation returns. Every reason is readable. Every reason points toward a specific response. And every reason is reversible. Given time, given consistency, given the willingness to show up the same way, long enough for the information to spread that something changed. Because it will spread. Through the alarm network. Through the social learning that moves between birds in your neighborhood constantly. Through the same system that carried the news that your yard was no longer reliable, now carrying the news that it is again. Start tomorrow morning. Same time, clean feeder, fresh water, quiet movements, not for a day, not for a week. Long enough for the birds to decide you kept your word. Tell me in the comments, when did your yard go quiet? And what did you eventually figure out was the real reason? I want to know what you found. I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.